What if the royal fairy tale we've all been sold isn't as simple as it looks? For years, Meghan Markle has been cast as the defining figure of a modern royal era, the outsider who challenged tradition, the duchess who stepped away and reshaped her own path. But behind the carefully curated appearances and high-profile projects, a different narrative has begun to take hold. Not a proven scandal, but a growing wave of scrutiny that questions how much of the public image aligns with reality. This isn't just about gossip or online noise anymore. It's about perception shifting in real time. When you look at Meghan's rise, it does read like a perfectly structured story, fast, compelling, almost cinematic. But in today's media environment, the more polished a narrative appears, the more people start to examine it. Contradictions, family disputes, and differing accounts, especially from figures like Samantha Markle, have added layers of tension to that story. These aren't confirmations of deception, but they do complicate the image that was once presented as straightforward. That's where the real shift is happening. Not in proven claims, but in competing versions of the same story. Meghan has long positioned herself as an outsider who challenged the system, while critics argue that the narrative itself was carefully shaped over time. The truth likely sits somewhere between those extremes, but the public conversation rarely allows for that kind of nuance. What makes this moment different is the scale. Questions that once lived on the fringes are now being discussed more openly, not because they've been proven, but because the gap between public expectation and visible reality has widened. And in an institution like the monarchy, where image and trust are deeply connected, even perception carries weight. Still, it's important to draw a clear line. Claims about hidden identities, secret arrangements, or fabricated histories remain unverified. They are allegations, not established facts. And while they may fuel dramatic storytelling, they don't currently have the legal or evidential backing to support the conclusions being suggested. What we're seeing instead is a broader clash between narrative control and public curiosity, between privacy and expectation, between a modern media strategy and a centuries-old institution. And in that clash, every detail gets magnified, every inconsistency gets analyzed, and every silence gets interpreted. The question isn't whether a dramatic hidden truth is about to explode, it's whether the gap between perception and proof will keep growing. Because in the world Meghan and Prince Harry now operate in, perception doesn't just follow the story, it becomes the story. According to Samantha Markle, the image the world was shown wasn't the full story. She claims that Meghan Markle grew up in a relatively comfortable environment supported by her father Thomas Markle, who provided opportunities that helped shape her early life. From Samantha's perspective, the self-made outsider narrative was simplified, perhaps even selectively told. She argues that as Meghan stepped onto the global stage, certain parts of her past, including close family relationships, were gradually pushed out of the spotlight. But these claims remain one side of a deeply personal family dispute, not established fact. What's undeniable is that conflicting accounts have created a fractured public narrative. Meghan has presented her journey as one of independence and resilience, while critics, including her own relatives, challenge that version. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, but the gap between these stories has fueled ongoing debate about authenticity and image. That tension escalates when more extreme allegations enter the conversation. Claims involving unnamed individuals, secret arrangements, or hidden pregnancies, like those attributed to a supposed figure identified only as a DL, are serious but unverified. There is no credible, publicly confirmed evidence supporting these accusations. While they are often presented in dramatic terms, they remain speculative and should be treated with caution. What these claims do reveal, however, is the scale of scrutiny surrounding Meghan and Prince Harry. Every detail, past, present, and even alleged, gets pulled into the spotlight and analyzed. In that environment, perception can quickly blur with speculation, and narratives can take on a life of their own. At its core, this isn't just a story about family conflict or media pressure. It's about how public figures are shaped, challenged, and sometimes redefined by competing narratives. Meghan's image, as a modern royal and outsider disruptor, has always been powerful. But with that visibility comes intense scrutiny, and once multiple versions of the same story exist, control over that image becomes harder to maintain. And that's where the real tension lies, not in unproven allegations, but in the widening gap between the story that was told and the questions that continue to follow it. The story becomes even more intense when unverified allegations are layered on top of an already complicated narrative. Claims from an unidentified figure, often referred to as a DL, paint a dramatic picture describing hidden arrangements and personal hardship. But it's crucial to be clear, these claims remain unproven and unsupported by verified evidence. They exist in the realm of allegation, not confirmation. Still, their presence adds fuel to an already growing fire, especially when placed against Meghan Markle's public image as a voice for empowerment. The contrast between perception and accusation is what keeps the conversation alive. At the same time, online communities have spent years dissecting public footage, searching for inconsistencies. Clips from appearances, such as the widely discussed Mayhew visit, are often analyzed frame by frame, with viewers pointing out visual anomalies in clothing, movement, or posture. Some interpret these moments as evidence of something unusual, while others argue they are simply the result of camera angles, fabric behavior, or normal physical variation during pregnancy. The reality is that visual interpretation alone is not reliable proof of anything conclusive. Moments like walking in heels, squatting, or changes in appearance across different days have all been used to support speculation. But medical experts have repeatedly noted that pregnancies can vary significantly from person to person, and what may seem unusual to one observer can be entirely normal for another. Without verified medical records or official statements contradicting the established narrative, these clips remain interpretations, not evidence. What's actually happening here is a pattern. When transparency is limited, people fill in the gaps themselves. And in the case of Prince Harry and Meghan, their choice to keep certain aspects of their lives private, especially around family, has unintentionally created space for these interpretations to grow. In a monarchy built on tradition and visibility, any break from established patterns attracts attention, but attention alone doesn't confirm wrongdoing. It simply reflects curiosity and sometimes projection. And that's the key distinction. What we're seeing isn't proof of a hidden reality. It's the result of a narrative vacuum where speculation expands to fill what hasn't been publicly explained. To understand why Archie's birth drew so much attention, you have to look at the tradition it diverged from. In the British monarchy, a royal birth has historically been treated as a public moment. Carefully managed, highly visible, and designed to reassure the public that the line of succession is secure. Figures like Princess Diana and Catherine, Princess of Wales, followed that pattern, appearing outside the Lindo wing shortly after giving birth. Those moments weren't just ceremonial, they symbolized transparency. But when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry welcomed their first child, they chose a different approach. There were no immediate hospital steps, no traditional timeline, and fewer details shared publicly. That decision, framed as a desire for privacy, marked a clear break from royal precedent. And while that choice is entirely within their rights as parents, it also created confusion in a system where consistency has always mattered. That's where perception began to shift. Reports around timing, location, and medical involvement were discussed widely, sometimes with conflicting details. But it's important to be clear. There is no verified evidence that official procedures were violated or that the legitimacy of Prince Archie has ever been legally questioned by the monarchy or the government. The difference lies in communication, not confirmation of wrongdoing. Traditionally, phrases like "a born of the body" have been part of royal and constitutional language, intended to ensure clarity around succession. But in modern practice, these matters are governed by official records and legal recognition, not speculation or public debate. And as it stands today, Archie and Princess Lilibet remain formally recognized within the line of succession. What made this situation volatile wasn't proof of any scandal, it was the absence of familiar signal. When long-standing traditions are changed without clear explanation, people start asking questions. Some of those questions are reasonable. Others escalate into theories that go far beyond the available facts. The idea that this situation represents a constitutional emergency is not supported by any formal action or legal process. The monarchy does not operate on rumors. It operates on documentation, law, and institutional procedure. And at present, none of those mechanisms have been triggered against Harry, Meghan, or their children. What has happened is a breakdown in trust between expectation and reality. The Sussexes chose privacy in a system built on visibility. And while that choice is understandable on a personal level, it has consequences in a public institution where perception plays a critical role. Because in the end, the story isn't about hidden truths waiting to explode. It's about how quickly uncertainty can grow when transparency changes. That's where the narrative takes a sharper turn. Critics argue that when faced with intense speculation, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have often responded through legal channels rather than direct public clarification. From their perspective, that approach is about protecting privacy and setting boundaries. But from a public standpoint, it can sometimes have the opposite effect, fueling curiosity instead of shutting it down. Still, it's important to be clear. There has been no verified evidence or official findings supporting claims of surrogacy, cover-ups, or illegitimacy. The absence of public detail is not proof of wrongdoing. It simply reflects a different approach to privacy than previous royal generations. What's really happening is a clash of expectations. This is a couple that has spoken openly in interviews, documentaries, and memoirs about deeply personal aspects of their lives. That openness created an expectation of transparency. So when certain areas, especially around their children, remain private, it feels inconsistent to some observers. But inconsistency is not the same as deception. It's a difference in what they choose to share versus what they choose to keep personal. Public perception, however, doesn't always follow that logic. In the age of social media, silence can be interpreted in many ways, sometimes unfairly. Online discussions, viral clips, and repeated claims can create the illusion of certainty even when the underlying evidence is weak or non-existent. Over time, that repetition begins to shape opinion regardless of factual grounding. At the same time, their broader public image has shifted. Once positioned as a powerful modern royal duo, they are now navigating a more complex space, part celebrity, part former royal, operating without the institutional support that once defined their role. That transition brings scrutiny from every direction: media, public, and even internal family narratives, including ongoing criticism from figures like Samantha Markle. But again, these are competing perspectives, not confirmed truths. The key issue isn't a hidden revelation waiting to explode. It's the erosion of trust in the eyes of certain audiences. When expectations of transparency aren't met, speculation fills the gap. And once that cycle starts, it becomes difficult to control, no matter how many statements or legal responses are issued. Because in the end, this isn't about one definitive answer. It's about a narrative that keeps evolving, shaped as much by perception as by reality. What began as scattered speculation has evolved into something much broader, a clash between perception and... For some observers, the combination of limited transparency, conflicting narratives, and intense media scrutiny has turned the story around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry into a kind of ongoing public investigation. But it's important to separate interpretation from fact. There is no verified evidence that the pregnancies, births, or legitimacy of their children were anything other than officially recorded and recognized. What is real is the shift in narrative. Meghan was once widely seen as a symbol of resilience and change, a modern figure within a traditional institution. Today, that image is more contested, not because a definitive truth has been exposed, but because unanswered questions, fair or not, have created a space where doubt can grow. And in a monarchy, perception can be just as powerful as reality. Traditionally, royal births were handled with a level of public visibility designed to eliminate uncertainty. Announcements, medical confirmations, and carefully managed timelines all played a role in reinforcing trust. In the case of Prince Archie, the process looked different, more private, less immediate, and less detailed. That difference didn't confirm wrongdoing, but it did break from expectation. And when expectations are broken without clear explanation, speculation tends to follow. Claims about missing doctors, fabricated records, or ghost medical teams have circulated widely, but they remain unproven and unverified. Official announcements were made and no credible authority has challenged their validity. The monarchy operates on documentation and legal recognition, not internet theories. Without formal evidence or institutional action, these claims stay in the realm of conjecture. What's really driving the story is something more subtle but more powerful, a vacuum of certainty. The Sussexes chose privacy in a system that historically relied on visibility. That choice is understandable on a personal level, but it has consequences in a public institution where trust is built through openness. So the tension remains, not because a hidden truth has been confirmed, but because the gap between what people expect to see and what they are shown continues to widen. And in that gap, the narrative keeps evolving. As the speculation intensifies, the conversation shifts from isolated claims to broader questions about perception, visibility, and trust. Some critics argue that the limited public appearances of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet have only fueled curiosity. In an age of constant media exposure, the relatively small number of clear, unfiltered images has stood out. When photos are released, they are often carefully composed, sometimes stylized and understandably controlled, reflecting the parents' desire for privacy. However, this approach has also led to online speculation, including extreme theories about digital manipulation or inconsistency. It's important to state clearly, there is no credible evidence supporting claims that the children are anything other than real, nor that official records are invalid. What's actually happening is a collision between modern privacy choices and traditional royal expectations. Historically, royal children were gradually introduced into public life, creating a sense of familiarity and continuity. By contrast, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have taken a far more guarded approach, limiting exposure and controlling how and when their children are seen. That decision, while understandable from a parental perspective, creates a gap, and in that gap, speculation grows. Online discussions often point to perceived inconsistencies in photos or appearances, but these interpretations are not reliable evidence. Differences in lighting, editing styles, camera angles, and even natural changes in children's appearance over time can easily be misread as something more significant. In reality, without verified documentation or official challenge, these observations remain subjective. The deeper issue here isn't proof, it's expectation. In a monarchy that has historically relied on visibility to build trust, reduced visibility feels unusual. So the narrative continues to evolve, not because a hidden truth has been confirmed, but because the balance between privacy and public expectation has shifted, and in that space, perception often becomes more powerful than reality.